Sup, y'all? I am your host, Taylor Onion, and this is Hang Time. We are back this week with Dr. JenFry, sports geographer, tech founder, TEDx speaker, founder, owner of JenFryTalks and Coordle, and most recently, the author of the book, I Said No, How to Have Boundaries and a Backbone Without Being a Jerk. Fry, as I call you, let's get some hang
Yes.
time. Welcome.
Hey, friend, I love your rebranding of this podcast as well as the logo. Like, this is some good stuff.
I appreciate it. It felt, it's one of those things where stuff just aligned earlier this
Yep.
year and it made sense. I had some gentle nudging from a mutual friend of ours, Dr. Ash Lokande, and so, to be able to have everything come to fruition and be rocking and rolling and have you on as I had you on as a Bloom Pod
Yep.
guest and not have you back on Hang Time. I'm excited for that as well. So I mentioned I typically refer you as Fry when we
Yep.
talk. We obviously know each other. If listeners heard our Bloom Pod episode, they know that we go way back because you were a volunteer assistant at Illinois, where I played in college. I'm curious. Let's start there. So I'm curious from your perspective, our 2011 run to the national championship match. What about that experience helped to maybe lay the foundation for some of the work that you're doing today?
Oh my gosh. That run, so I have to take like a few steps back to take a few steps forward. And so to give people kind of a contextual idea of how I got there. So I was the head volleyball coach at Norfolk State from '07 to '09. And I got a call from a mentor in, I think it was the summer of 10. Yeah, summer of 10. And he said, I know the head coach at Washington State, and he's looking for an assistant. And would you be interested? And it's like end of July, season's about to start in like 6 days. And so I'm like, okay, let me talk to him. So we have a great conversation. It's on a Wednesday. And I'm in Philadelphia. And, when I'm talking to him, I'm like, "Okay, this seems interesting." I never would have thought I'm going to the Pac-12. Like, that would have never then the Pac-10, that's how old I am, the Pac-10. I would have never in a million years thought of I'm at HBCU, I played at D2 school, and so the next day I'm flying out, and I'm at the airport, and I call the guy, and I say, "Hey, if you're really interested in me, I'm about to fly home. Send me a plane ticket to Washington State to interview." Like, I just had balls. I don't know what was going on. And the thing I always say is, like, never ask for something you're not prepared to receive.
Mm.
Because, baby, an hour later, your girl had that plane ticket. And I
Right.
remember I'm sitting at the airport bawling. So I'm like, now it got real. Like, the plane ticket was like $1,100. I'm flying in like an hour. Instead of going to Norfolk, I'm going to Spokane.
Right.
And so I remember calling my captain, Nicole, and just bawling. I'm like, this is what's going down. And I always appreciate her because she's a very blunt and honest person. She was like, you'd be a fool to turn down that job. She was like, I'd even take the job. And I was like, okay, okay. And so I get there, it's like 8 p.m. on Thursday. I interview all day Friday. I don't even have any like suit or anything. So I interview wearing my USA high performance gear, shorts, a t-shirt, and a backpack. I interview with the president, the AD, literally wearing that. And so the next day, which is a Saturday, I'm about to fly out. He takes me to PF Chang's and slides a receipt, the back of a receipt to me with my offer. And he says, you have till tomorrow at 5 o'clock to decide. So this is from Washington State to Norfolk. So literally across the country. And so I remember sitting there and it was just one of these like, you have to take this because you never know when you get this opportunity. So I make the decision to move my whole life in like 6 days and move across the country. And we are just bad. He is a bad human. We are bad. And that is the 2010 season. And by February 2011, the whole staff is fired. I'd moved my mom across, like I'd moved everything. And so I'm at this position of like, what do I do? And the assistant at the time was like, we're gonna get severance. Go be a volunteer at a big school. I'm like, okay. So I send all these emails. I'm also repping, I'm doing all this stuff. Send all these emails to all the top 25 schools. And it's April. I'm at a Dallas Mavericks game and I'm sitting there with my friend and I get this call. I can't remember what the area code was for Hambly. And I'm in the bathroom at the Mavericks game and in the big stall, talking to him about he saw my application. We're talking all this and had a good conversation. I'm like, okay, whatever. So then I get back to my seat, and then Flynn calls. So I go back to the same stall. I'm sitting in the stall talking to her, like, okay, good call. And then I get another call from Hamley, who's like, hey, you want to do this? And I'm like, okay. And so I make this life changing decision in a bathroom in a Dallas Maverick stall. It just like the weirdest place to make the decision that changed the trajectory of your life.
Right.
And so then a month later, I have emergency back surgery, and I am now moving to Illinois. I have the emergency back surgery. 3 days later, my mom, my cat, and I are driving from Washington State to Illinois. And let me tell you, in South Dakota, one of those two almost got put out because, baby, the cat or the mom was about to be put out.
Right.
And I get to Illinois, I'm renting an apartment, and it was a third story, and I couldn't bend, lift, or twist for 8 weeks. So I would have to carry up handfuls of clothing or one bag at a time up three flights of stairs. Randy, who at that time was the trainer, was absolutely wonderful for me and helped me in such beautiful ways to recover. Like, going back to your question, I think the first thing that it helped me do my work is understanding that at certain points in your life, you're just going to need a lot more from humans than you'll realize. And the team, Randy, Flynn, all of them were just all of them were so helpful to me in ways I didn't realize I needed. Like, I did not realize. And so I'm going to tell this story and you're going to be shocked because you probably never heard it. I'm having that. And so let me preface that the situation we came from Washington State was pretty abusive. Like, all of us were in trauma. And so I get to Illinois and I don't have this recognition of what we had been through. And so we're about to leave to Middle Tennessee. And Hamley brings me in and he was like, Jen, I just don't know if this is healthy for you. Not you're a bad seed, nothing, but like, I am worried about you. And I remember sitting there, we're undefeated at this time. We're about to go to Middle Tennessee. And he was like, I just don't know if I can have you around the program because of like, I'm worried about you and your mental health. And
Mhm.
sitting there, one of the things like so I'm jumping forward to the work I do now. And one of the things I realize is that when you have to have tough conversations, you have the tough conversation. Hambly did not sugarcoat it. He did not try and, oh, we're like none of that. It was, I'm just going to give you this hard information. But when he gave me the hard information, I knew it was based in love. It wasn't this, I'm going to smack you across the face. You're worthless. You're doing this. It was like, I am concerned about you and your health and who you are as a human. And so when I do the work I do now, I think about that. And when you have to give hard information, give the hard information. No one likes hard information that is a Big Mac sandwich and you're trying to figure out where the layer of the secret sauce is, right? And that's where so many times what happens with hard information is that people will massage it so much that you're not even sure of what happened, what
Right.
you need to do, what you're feeling. And he gave me that information. I remember sitting there ingesting it. And I mean, like, baby, we're about to go on that bus. Like, it's not days later, it is right before. And I said, give me an opportunity to get therapy and show you I can change. Like, let me have that opportunity. And he looked at me. He's like, okay, I'll give you this opportunity. And Illinois was, I'm a volunteer at this time. I mean, I just have like the severance I'm making. And Illinois was so great is that they let me use the therapy services for free. And I started immediately. And the thing I will say in that situation, I was proud about myself. The change he said he could see, even to the point where there were other volunteers that if he had a problem or concern with them, he would call me to help talk to them. And so when I do this work now, I think about when you have to give hard feedback, you give it. We don't, because many times, like, if we're really honest with ourselves, we're not concerned with the other person. We're concerned with ourselves. We're
Right.
concerned with how people are going to look at us, how people are going to think about us, how they're going to talk about us. We're so concerned about that we don't give the real thing that can help a person be a better human. And so that was so instrumental in that. I think another kind of aspect of my experience at Illinois was talking about roles, right? Like, Hambly was great. Like, this is your role. It might be
Mhm.
hard to take, it might be, but like, this is your role. You get to determine if you're going to accept it a lot or not. Like, you get to determine that. And that's why I think that the team did well, is because everyone had a great understanding of what their role was. And also, this is from a coach. You might say a different perspective. I'd love to hear kind of your perspective as the athlete.
Yeah, I'm nodding, I'm smiling
Yeah.
because I, on the flip side of that, had very similar experiences. Like Kevin is who he is, and
Mhm.
he's authentically that way to anybody's that he's interacting with. So, I'm thinking of 2 moments. One, when I think I was still a freshman, and, he met with us every other week individually,
Yep.
one-on-one. Like, that's probably
Yep.
my first foray into therapy was my meetings with
Yeah.
Kevin. And so in one of those meetings, though, he had I don't even remember what it was we were talking about, but he just, like, bluntly cut off in the middle of it, and it was like he's like, "I don't know you, Tay. Like, you're giving me these answers that are, like, very clearly feel like you're like, I understand who you want me to think that you are and
Mm.
that you're okay in these things, but I don't know you. So, like, if we're gonna keep doing this, we're gonna keep having these conversations. I wanna help you, and I want you to be here and be a part of this team. I don't want you to be a tourist, so I need you to be real with me." And at
Ooh.
the time, I'm 18 and I'm like, "You don't know, like, what have you not been paying attention? What do you
Yeah.
mean?" And so I think that was the first kind of, I guess just like a crack to my foundation because you're an athlete, obviously you present in a very
Mhm.
specific way. I came from a very small pond and was a big fish in that small pond, and so I always had control over how I got good grades. I
Mm.
was one of the best athletes, certainly on my teams and probably in my high school as well, and so I think there
Yeah.
was a way that I was used to presenting to
Yeah.
people who were in positions of authority, to my coaches, to my teachers, to my parents, all these things. And so that was, again, the first kinda crack in the foundation. He didn't sugarcoat it. He just was like,
Mhm.
the Hamley shoulder shrug, like, "Tay, I don't know you,"
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
kinda we laid it out from there. And then I think full circle, coming back to that after the 2011 season, I can remember meeting with him, and I'm now one of the senior leaders, part of the senior class on the team, and we've come off, obviously, the greatest season in school history.
Yeah.
We've lost 2 All-American outside hitters, one who obviously just went on to win the first Olympic gold for
Yep.
USA Volleyball. So, like, some ballers on the outside, and we've got a redshirt freshman stepping in, we've got our kinda sophomore class who's gonna step up into those positions, and they're big shoes to fill. I can remember having a conversation with Kevin, like, I'm trying to be what the team needs, and I can't figure out like, I knew who I was. I knew what my role was with Barchi and with Ward, and I wasn't as sure of that role with the younger kids. And how do I know how to be a good number 2 and or number 3, 4, 5 down the depth chart. Like, I can offer insights, I can step up in this way, but to be the person who's now, the oldest and one of the veterans, and to look back and say, "Hey, this is what we should be doing," or "Here's how I can help you," or these I wasn't used to being in that space, and so I
Mhm.
just can remember saying, "I don't," I'm trying to be what the team needs, and he just, again, very simply is like, "You can't shapeshift to what like, the team
Mm.
needs you to be you, like, bring what you have to the team, and they need you to be kind of authentically yourself and lead how you know how to lead. Don't try to be something else." Dynamics change every single year because of the personalities that we have, and so I think again, for me, like, those are 2 conversations I reflect back to pretty often. Again, he's like, Kevin's Kevin through and through. He's not gonna sugarcoat stuff. He's trying
No.
to, um, to get a point across and get quickly from A to B in a conversation, and how do we solve problems efficiently, knowing that there is a base there and a foundation of love. That's ultimately kind of
Mhm.
the space he leads from. So it's so interesting to hear from the coaching side, obviously very similar experience on the athlete side of
Yeah.
things. That's cool to
Yeah, I
hear.
mean, yeah, when I was at Illinois, I was just mentally a mess, and I appreciate Flynn handling me, Niff, like, Randy, like, all those people I worked with, even the team. There's Grace, I just feel like it was such a special place. I mean, I was 30 I mean, like, it's been 15 years, Tay, like, that shit blows my mind.
We don't need to say all that, that it's been 15, come on.
And, like, I was such a baby then and figuring out so much stuff, also coming through not realizing, like, with the lens of trauma, and I don't think how many people who come into new jobs, new relationships, understand that they have a lens of trauma that they're looking through, and it affects so much of how they interact with people, how they feel stuff, all of that. And so, when I think about how it affects my work now, I sit at the intersection of conflict and culture. I think about how many times people don't understand that. I mean, everyone's always like, it's your tone, it's your tone, it's your tone. Sometimes when you have to deliver hard stuff, you can't, a smiling tone isn't going to help it. Like, right? Like, you can't deliver hard things with a really smiling tone. Sometimes the tone in the situation is going to be what the tone is. And you can get caught up in the tone and you can miss out on the words that are being told that can really save you. And because, right, if I focus on the tone, I don't have to worry about those words. I can be like, "Well, Taylor, your tone was a problem." And
Mm,
I can just be like, "I'm not even gonna listen to the real stuff you're gonna say."
yep.
And so one of the things, I own a tech business. I work in this. One of the things I try and do is I try and be able to take feedback well and be coachable. Like, those are two of the things I try and really work hard on. I'm not saying that things don't hurt my feelings. I'm not saying that things have been said to me. I'm like, "Oh, my heart." Like, I gotta take a second to compose myself like that. And I try and sit in like what's being told to me and understanding it. And so I think that that season, not only the overall experience of it, but just that season really has been foundational to who I became and who I continually work to become.
I love that. That I think obviously we all were on the same team working for the same goals, but it's always
Yeah.
so interesting to me to hear different perspectives of like it's a shared experience, but it also was very individual to go
Yes.
through. So it's always so interesting. You at some point then chose obviously 2011 happens, you move on, you continue coaching for a few years
Hmm.
and then you make a move out of coaching I think
Yeah.
to Duke before you even started to get into
Yeah.
kind of the work that you're doing today. So tell me about the decision to leave coaching, to leave college athletics, to make these moves, and then to kind of, get into what you're doing now.
Yeah, I think, when you say decisions, you make it sound like I actually was doing stuff thoughtful, which is
Yeah.
so not the case at all. I was a coach and I thought I would be like, I loved it as being the way to help young people. Like, I loved coaching. I love that, to help these athletes develop at such kind of hard times in their life. Because when athletes would come to college, they're used to being, like you said, a big fish in a small pond. They are used to, in some aspects, everything's controlled. They know what's going on. And now, baby, everything's on you.
Mm,
Like, you have to figure out everything and win and play well and make new friends and learn a new place and get good grades. Like, I don't think that coaches really take into consideration like how much is expected of young athletes. Like, I don't fully think they know in theory, but like a lot of that's hard. And so I thought I'd be a coach forever. And then I started to get more involved in conversations on race. And let me preface, like, I come from Arizona, 5 minutes from the Mexican border. My mom was white, majority minority city. Probably at any time, 40% of my school is undocumented. So we didn't ever like have these conversations. And so I started getting more involved in them. And at the same time, I started to get like more resentful about the time that was being used. Like, one game, you're gone for 4 days, right? You leave
mm.
Thursday, you practice Friday, you play Saturday at night, you come back Sunday. And I started to get more resentful about the time that I was gone. I was missing events and weddings and anniversaries. And I was like, I'm just missing so much stuff. I started to try and kind of chart my like, how was I feeling? If we won, we lost. Like, I'm trying to figure that out. And it came to be a point where I was like, as I was the recruiting coordinator, you can't turn your phone off when you're recruiting coordinator. You get one chance with some of these athletes. That kid that was looking to transfer, if you miss that call, baby, and you call the club coach, the college coach, you put the bat signal out, you get no other opportunity. So you have to always be available. And I didn't like that anymore. And so it came to be a point where during the 2015 season, I was like, okay, I'm figuring out how I'm feeling. I need to make a decision. And I told myself, November 1st is your deadline. If you have to either say you're resigning, if not, forget about this other stuff. It's all about coaching. Like, you have to make the decision because you can tell your friends you want to do this new thing. You can tell everyone else, but baby, when you tell the person who's paying you, that's the real story. Everything is great in theory until you talk about that check.
Right.
And so I made the decision on November 1st, and our head coach would have like this cadence of how she ran meetings, and she'd always say this thing at the end. And I knew like I'm sitting in the meeting, like trying to make, I bet like I was like looking like a scarecrow because I'm trying to remain calm, about to make this life change again, another life changing decision. And when she gets to the, I don't know what the last saying was like anything for the good of the order. And I just remember being like, I'm resigning. And I just blurted it out. And like everyone looked at me, I looked at them like we're all shocked. And so I said, I'm resigning. I think I want to do this other thing. And that, like, the scariest moments will lead to the best things. I
Mm,
can't even imagine what would have happened if I would have stayed in college coaching. Like, I can't even fathom it. And so I had November 15th came. I don't think we made the tournament, and that was it. And lucky enough, I'd been on committees and building relationships with people at Elon. I got asked to do kind of this. Do you want to be a part of this workshop for, I can't remember, we were doing some type of bias training. I was like, okay. And that's where I also met one of my best friends at that in January, which allowed me to work for 3 months at Elon, the DEI Center.
mm,
And so I just took opportunities. Was also when I was at Elon, I thought I wanted to work in student development. And so I got a list of all the student development people in the CAA and just called every single one of them, asking what they did, their jobs. And one of them, she was great. And after I got to my job at Duke, she called me and was like, hey, we have this job open. I was like, girl, I just took this job. Going to Duke was one of the best things because I was able to get out of athletics. I was like, I'm done by 5. I don't even know what this means. Like, what is
right.
this life? I then, Colin Kaepernick kneeled. All of my friends were like, "What do we do? How do we handle it?" I became the person to help them navigate all this because in college athletics, we didn't talk about these topics. We didn't
Mm-mm.
talk about navigating hard stuff. We didn't talk about these in nuance. And so I became the go-to person. And that's really what started my trajectory into speaking and doing this work.
You've since so I feel like also the TED Talk that you did also
Yes.
kind of relaunched you back into a college athletics world, but in a very different way
Yes.
as you just
Yes.
mentioned. Your work since then has obviously gone even outside of just the work that you've done in college athletics. I keep
Yeah.
seeing graphics pop up that are with healthcare companies and other
Yep.
things that you're doing. So tell me, I guess,
Yep.
what how things have shifted in the last few years.
Yeah, so I was doing a lot of at the intersection of race and sport. And then early 23, I started to see more states start to cancel DE. And I just was like, this is starting to, I'm starting to pay attention. I don't want to be that I can only work in like 4 states or I have to change my language. And so in my workshops, I started to pay attention to how people, where people started to lean in more. And then I started to like elongate those parts and make the race part smaller and really play with it. And I was like, okay, I don't see people really talking about conflict. I don't see them talking about it in a nuanced way. I don't see them talking about it in a way that can build skills. Let me start looking at that work. And so doing that, and I sat kind of the trajectory was I sat there in a section of conflict and DEI. And I said, what if I just jump and talk at the intersection of conflict and culture? Because the more I'm paying attention to it, we need a lot of conflict work. And for me, you can't do good DEI work unless you have good conflict work because you have to be able to navigate conflict. You can have like the theoretical, sexy, I read the book. That's not telling you how you should navigate with your grandma. That's not giving you the skills to navigate with your grandma, with your mom, your partner. And that's what people needed because coming out of COVID, everyone read the books, everyone watched the movies, and they still weren't doing the hard work because it's not named. Being at Thanksgiving dinner and knowing you're about to tell your uncle off is hard work.
Mm.
Being at Thanksgiving dinner knowing that your mom's gonna get pissed off at you for telling your uncle off is hard work. Being at a friend's house with a group of friends and you know one of them is gonna say something problematic and you have to be the person is hard work, knowing that you might alienate yourself from your friend. And no one was prepared for that. And so I just kind of sat in and said, how can I help people get prepared for those things to help them just continue to be better humans? Because if we don't have the ability to navigate conflict well, what does that say for our future? And not only our future as a society, but our future relationships. Our
Mm.
relationships are all about conflict and good, bad, ugly, otherwise it's normal. And if we don't know how to navigate it, we are not going to be able to have healthy, fruitful relationships. And so I really made the jump and said, not only let me talk about this different space, but also let me get into other industries because talking about conflict crosses everything. Everyone across all industry does not handle it well. I don't know if there's one industry that handles it actually well. And so that's why I made those jumps.
I don't think that there is, obviously, and we know, I think in sports, maybe not as much right now. I think there's a societal shift that's been happening, which I wanna circle back to, but
Yes.
there in sports, conflict happens so consistently, right? Like,
Mhm.
in volleyball, "Dude, you missed that pass. Let's talk about how we can, hold ourselves accountable. How can you hold your teammates accountable? How can you shift your defense, your offense, do these things to make quick changes based on conflict that's happening in the moment and shift into that space." So, it's probably conflict is always uncomfortable, but it's probably more common to discuss in sports.
Mhm.
The other thing that I'm thinking about is how in sports we tell athletes, "You're gonna be so highly recruited to get a job after this." People love teamwork, they love leaders, you've got communication, you have leadership, all these
Yep.
things. And then the athletes get into the workplace and they knew how to do that on the court, in the gym, on the track, on the
Yep.
field, but moving into a workplace and trying to transfer those skills, those are also things that we're not talking about. So it's
Yep.
so again, to your point, this need, this shift, whatever, to move into a space where we're talking about conflict more often, it's not exclusive to sport. It shouldn't be exclusive to sport. We need it in every space. Aside from the obvious, what has fueled this space where we're avoiding conflict? We're very divided in general right now. Like things feel
Mhm.
like it's this or that. There's no in between. The work that you're doing with conflict is so important because we've lost a way to disagree amicably, and there's spaces where that's okay, and there's spaces where it's not okay to just,
Mhm.
okay, agree to disagree and move on from that. So I'm curious if you think this was driven by a handful of things, by any one thing. There's obviously the political landscape, and either you don't want to engage in those conversations because you don't want to lose friends, or you want to engage in those conversations because you need to know where people are that are around you.
Mhm.
But I'm curious to know, I guess if you're seeing things, like are there patterns in the conversations you're having that you're like, "Oh, this is kind of the catalyst that, put us into this space that we're in now."
Man, that's such a layered question. And so I'll say I
It
think
is.
it is so layered. I think the first thing, to be honest, I don't know if we have so I think the first thing about it is that we now have way more information
Mm,
at our fingertips. Meaning back so I think about back in the day, the information we had was limited. Oh, I don't think the divide was that big because we didn't fully see how big the divide was
mm,
or what was occurring with it. And so there's way more information that we have that I think keeps that divide because before it was like you and I could be friends. We just will agree to disagree on this thing. But the thing has such a domino effect now. And that domino effect has layers that go to it. So it would be like, well, we can agree to just disagree on LGBT rights. We'll just say something like very vague like that. Well, the problem is that there's domino effects to that. And so now the question is like, okay, you are my best friend and you're disagreeing on this thing. For me, it's about humanity. For you, it's about religion. And so now it's such a domino effect that the gape is so much wider. And how, I mean, honestly, how do we cross that when it's like we're talking about humans and how what people deserve as a human. And so
mhm.
that's what I'm saying, like, we have so much more information. And I look back at and I mean, this will get political because that's right, a part of it. I look back to like I'm actually formally undocumented, and the reason why I was able to get a green card was from a Ronald Reagan law. He had it where if you were in the country for this long, you did this, this, and this, you had an immediate path to citizenship. Immediate. No, don't collect $200, don't pay $200. Like it was you check these things and immediately you could go in line. I remember being in line in Calexico and within like a month or two I had my green card. It was that and that was the Ronald Reagan rule. And there's two parts of it. The first part was people had a immediate path to citizenship, and the second part was that anyone who hired undocumented people would get fined, and there's big issues. Well, both those laws ended up falling apart because of the people that were being held accountable that were hiring undocumented people. And so, like, you had a Republican making those laws. You had Bush talking about immigration. And now it's the polar opposite. So because it's so like, how do we cross that divide? How do we not become siloed when it isn't a Republican saying, I disagree on how immigration is ran, but I still look at them as humans. So now it's like they're not human and we're going to treat them as such.
Yeah.
So how do we disagree respectfully when that's the core component of it? I
Right.
can, right? Like, and so maybe back to saying, like, we could disagree because, like, we were talking about policy. You as a conservative under Bush, like, you thought about immigration policy in this way, but you still looked at them as humans.
Mhm.
So I can talk about it from a person who's undocumented, like, this is my viewpoint. Now it's like, we are just arguing their humanity as
Yeah.
people who are coming across the border. And so I think that right now is why it's so much more polarizing is that we can't talk about policy because we're sitting in morals and humanity. And how do I disagree and talk to you? And I can't agree to disagree with you when we're talking about ICE and going into schools. Like I can't respectfully be like, we'll disagree and disagree, but let's go have brunch. Like I can't do that, right?
That is the most humanity as the answer is the most concise, I think, response that I've heard, and not that I'm not, like, out here on the streets asking this question all
Yeah.
the time, right? But I think that's the most concise. Yeah, like, that's it, right? Like, we have forgotten that, like, this isn't it's not we're not talking about policy anymore, we're talking about the treatment of
Yeah.
humans, and, like, yes, there is a way that we can get to maybe not what everybody wants, but what the
Yeah.
majority wants, and we can do it in a respectful and a way that focuses on the human experience and the human elements of this. I love that answer.
Can I? So I'll also add, coming over and document is a civil offense, and then it becomes this like, well, you deserve that. You're a criminal. I'm like, bruh, you were drunk driving, but now this is a civil offense deserves to be just treated in the most ungodly ways, and that's the problem, right? Is that this what they feel like is the crime deserves everything. And so
Mhm.
that's why it's like we and then so a lot of what I say on social media, I'm like, bro, these are humans. Like we are talking about humans. Like
Yeah.
why are we saying these such horrible things about humans that they're just trying to live life? And so I think that's the problem of what's happened with all the rhetoric, all these talking points is that they people who are immigrants have stopped being humans in all ways, shape, or form. And so, how do we agree respectfully and agree to disagree on human type of stuff? Like I said, we're not talking about the nuances of the fairness doctrine with Reagan or the immigration policy or with what Bush was saying. Like, we're not talking about these policies in a nuanced way. We are saying because you came across the border document, you are a criminal and deserve to any treatment possible. And
Mhm.
that's the hard thing about what is going on right now in society.
Yeah. It's Gosh, we could probably spend way more time talking about that, but
Yeah.
for the sake of
Mhm.
time, I wanna get to your book as well, and
Yes.
I also wanna touch on, so we mentioned sometimes the work in conflict, the work in DEI, the work when it comes to having discussions on race. These are topics that people often shy away from. I guess what I want to make note of here is like the work you're doing is not always centered in immigration policies and doing these
Yeah.
things. Like sometimes it is just the conflict discussion of, gosh, my employee shows up late to work every
Yes.
single day, or he's not pulling his weight, and I don't know
Yep.
how to have that like that. Those conflicts, which are, I don't wanna say they're much more simple because it is still a complicated and people still
They're more
shy.
common.
Yes, yes, that is more of the everyday, I guess, occurrence of
Mhm.
conflict. I wanna, get into that space too now and maybe talk about what inspired you to write this book. I said no.
Mhm.
Let's start there.
First off, as a speaker, one of the things that people say is that you have to have a book. The top speakers have a book. And that was a thing of if my goal is to be on the top stages, then I have to have a book. Like that just really became very obvious. And I did the research and really making this move to broaden outside of sports. I need to have a book. I think the second thing, so the title at first was going to be called Kind Asshole because I consider myself a kind asshole. I'm not nice. I try and be really kind, but baby, sometimes it comes out. And so that was kind of the title, was Kind Asshole: How to Have Backbone and Boundaries Without Being a Jerk. And then I'm not sure if you know the author Lovey Jones.
Mm,
She wrote Little
I don't think so.
Troublemaker. She's
Okay.
also a speaker. Yeah. So she had um a book academy. And so I was at this point where I had the goal of saying, okay, I'm gonna write this book. And my goal was to have it done, the first draft, by the end of 24. So I had this first draft, and a lot of times, I think what scares people from writing books is that people are like, you have to, have your space clear and the candles going and the birds chirping. When people said to write your dissertation, you have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
have all this stuff. And I was like, nah, I'm writing this. I'm doing voice to text when I'm driving. Like, I am randomly putting notes everywhere. Like, that's how I did mine. And so I finished it to a point. And so I was kind of in a way lost, because I was like, okay, I don't know what my next step is, what this looks like. And I saw the ads for a book academy, listened to the thing. I was like, this is it. And I went to it, and it really gave me like the clearness that I needed. We had conversations on the title. I got feedback, and they were like, if you want to sell this to schools, Amazon, other stuff, you're going to have to change the title because you don't have the following to be able to cuss in the title. And that makes sense, because actually, I was at speaking engagement. Someone came over, they're like, would this be good for high schoolers? I can say yes now.
Right.
And so that's what led me to it, because I felt like in doing this conflict work, the amount of people that just can't say no to stuff. And they are sitting here resentful, hating life, upset because they are unwilling to make someone upset. And so, really trying to help people, especially women, be able to gain the control and the self advocacy in their life, to be able to say no, to be able to set boundaries, to be able to be in situations where in other times they would melt like a squid. So many people can give that first no, but it's the consecutive no's in the consecutive different ways from the consecutive different people makes it hard. And then they end up just saying yes. And they are so resentful the whole time. So for me, it was to give people the opportunity to have hard conversations, to set boundaries, to advocate for themselves, and to be stronger, to live the life that they're going to want to live. Because on the front end, people, what they'll do is like, well, I said no once and no one listened. Baby, those people haven't listened to you for 20 years. You think one no? No, you have to keep on it. You have to keep telling them. And that's when it gets really hard. So, how do we prepare people for the really hard, continual knows and setting of boundaries, and knowing that it takes practice? Someone's going to say no. Then another person going to step over that boundary. They're going to have to set it again, because people know you, and they know, if I just keep doing it this way, you'll eventually say yes. And so, really helping people, preparing them for what is it going to look like, and how do they need to build that skills.
What would you say are some of the most common myths about setting boundaries that you have come across as you were putting together this book?
I think one of the common myths are that, like, in a way, like, you don't need to have boundaries, that having boundaries is bad. I think a lot of people, like, when folks will set a boundary, another person will laugh or be like, "Oh my gosh, you're being dramatic." Right? Like, and so people have that feeling, if they set a boundary, that it's a bad thing, because people have learned a language to make you feel bad about it. So then you're questioning, should I be doing that? I think the next thing is that when you set a boundary, that it's what you expect the other person to do versus what you do. So, for instance, if we're in an argument and I tell you, Taylor, don't yell at me, you're yelling, that's not setting a boundary. Setting a boundary is saying, if you continue yelling at me, I will not engage in this conversation.
Mm,
That's setting a boundary. It's what you're going to do. And people don't want the decision to fall on them. That's hard, because I
mhm.
have to make the decision. And so, because I have to make the decision, I don't want to do it. So I'm going to tell you what to do. Taylor, stop yelling at me. And now you didn't stop yelling at me. Well, now you're the problem, versus me saying, if you continue yelling, I'm not going to engage in the conversation. And so I have to make decisions, and people do not want to make decisions. That's why I said that people have a really hard time self advocating for themselves, because they have to make a decision.
Absolutely.
I have to make the decision, if I'm going to be in a job that's not going to give me a raise, I have to make a decision to leave. You staying and complaining about them not giving the raise, that's on you. That's not on them. And people don't want to make the decision and handle the repercussions, because there's going to be consequences either way. Consequence if you stay, consequence if you go.
I think that I'm thinking of, it was a meme or a GIF or something that would float around years ago where people would say, "This is how I offer advice." Like, I'll say, "I think you should wash your clothes 7 times a day, but
Yep.
that's just me." And they throw their hands up,
Yeah.
like, "That's just my opinion, like, you don't have to listen to me." And
Yep.
that
Mhm.
kinda takes, like, the onus off of it. Obviously, I personally don't think anyone needs to wash their clothes 7 times a
No.
day. We'll throw that
No.
back out there.
No, please don't.
The first thing that came to mind, I think that to what you said about boundaries, that's the thing that it's making me think of because we're so scared of essentially, like, how do I hold myself accountable in this space? But if I
Yeah.
put it off on someone else, like, I can offer my thoughts, I can say, "Don't yell at me," but that's really it's the other person's fault for not
Yeah.
listening to me. So, I'm curious, I guess you've
Well, can
kinda
I
Yeah.
can I just jump onto that? We see that, and before this, we were talking about like dating, and I'll see so many people who be like, "My partner's not doing this, 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 and this." It's like, well, have you told them? No. Well, the problem is that you don't want to tell them because you're worried that they won't actually do it, and now you have to make the decision. So
Mhm.
now my partner doesn't keep shutting the door, and I'm mad. Well, have you told them how important it is for the door to be shut? No. Because you know that if you're like, "Hey, the door needs to be shut, it's important to me," and they don't do it, you have to make the decision. Do I stay or do I go? Do I just be quiet and keep shutting the door? Now the decision is on you, and that makes it harder versus being the other person they're the problem.
And the unspoken thing here is that you could lose someone's love or affection or
Yeah,
admiration by putting that boundary in place, which is what makes it so scary, right? Like,
yeah,
have you told your partner that you wanted the door to be shut? No, because if I tell them and they know that I want the door to be shut, they might leave because they want the door to be open, right? So
yeah.
there's so many there's so many different layers, obviously, to all of these
Yep.
things. But we've touched on, I think you shared a really good tangible example of the yelling piece and how to, I guess, hold yourself accountable in that space and kind of
Mhm.
set your baseline. The same thing, it also makes me think of job negotiations, right? If you go
Yep.
into a job negotiation or offer and you know, okay, it's got to be this title, it's got to be this, whatever to be able to take it, kind of the baseline of it. There's a similarity there. Anyway, I want to kind of shift into the last phase here. What is your favorite chapter or concept from the book? Why does it resonate? Give me the quick 60-second synopsis of
Ooh.
that.
Okay, so maybe I'd say the chapter that resonates the most is chapter 6. It says, "You do not get to be mad." And it's just a story about a friend of mine who wanted to go somewhere. She wanted to go see her brother, and she was waiting for a friend, and the friend was, like, 45 minutes late, and I said, "Well, why don't you just leave and go?" She's like, "No, no, they're on their way." And I was like, "Yeah, they're on their way, but, like, you wanted to leave 45 minutes ago." And she was like, "Well, I'll just get in the car and I'll be mad." I said, "You don't get to be mad. You waited. Like, you waited for the person. You could have left, but you put them on the way being more important as you going to your thing." And so I was like,
Mhm.
"You don't get to be mad. You have to sit with you made the decision to wait for them, and so you have to own it. I decided to wait for them, so I can't be mad that they're late. I could have left 30 minutes ago." But the sirens call of, "Well, they're on their way. I don't want them to be upset with me. They chose to be late. You're making the choice to stay. You don't get to be mad." And so many times we are missing out on great things and then being upset versus realizing the onus is on us to be able to make a decision.
Before I ask my closing question here, any final advice you have for listeners who are navigating, boundaries, burnout, big change?
You have to just sit in it and move through it. If you shy away, it's going to be 15,000 times worse. You have to sit in the hard moments and move through it. You have to. You can read every book. You can read my book. You can read any book. And it's all theory. You have to do the work and know that every time you sit in the hard moment, it's going to make you better. And that's the biggest thing.
Okay, if you could get some hang time with any woman in sports, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, if I can get hang time with any woman in sports, oh my gosh, I think Serena Williams,
Mm,
for her to go from pro sport to venture to she just did this modeling thing that looked like Grace Jones, I think. Like she just all these iterations of her. I want to talk about those iterations because I think she's doing it wonderfully and I want to know the friction that she's navigated through those iterations.
I love it. Okay, where can listeners grab the book if they wanna pre-order it right now?
Pre-order it. You can grab the pre-order of the Kindle on Amazon for 9.99. You can pre-order the paperback on Barnes and Noble for 14.99. And if you have like the Barnes and Noble EPUB or anything, you can also get that for $9.99. So we tried to keep it really cost effective. So Barnes& and Noble or Amazon are those 2 places.
Amazing. Fry, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join me on Hang Time.
I appreciate you, Tay. Keep doing amazing stuff.
I appreciate it. All right, we will see you back in a couple of weeks with our next guest.